So I thought we might have been done for the day. And then the Bucks traded a whole bunch of draft picks for Jrue. So as far as Bledsoe and George Hill, that's fine. We know how bad Bledsoe would get in the playoffs for them. George Hill, I mean, solid rotation piece, but you're trying to make sure Giannis stays, so I get it. But these draft picks, my goodness. So it's 3 picks and 2 pick swaps. I don't know the specifics of them yet, which ones are protected and all that stuff, but my goodness, I mean, talk about going all in to make sure Giannis stays. Because if Giannis is gone, well, that pretty much writes itself. I don't need to tell you. Now, as I'm doing this video, I don't know what the protections are, and I don't really feel like waiting because obviously I got to get the video up. So we think, all right, the Pacers have the Bucks have the Pacers pick, number 24 this year. They have next year's pick. Then they have 3 straight seasons in which their pick is locked up in protections from Cleveland, so maybe you could have incorporated those picks into this in some way. And then after 2025, they have all their picks. So there's a chance that there's going to be some picks in the distant future that are being moved here. Now, there's going to be some swaps, so it's not as if they're not going to have any picks. But regardless of whatever combination you want to do of what years are going to the Pelicans and which ones are swaps, they really need Giannis to stay. Now, perhaps they could arrange a sign and trade, that sort of thing, but it's not a guarantee. I think that will be the most talked about thing with this move, so I decided to lead off with that. But of course, there are basketball things to discuss. Jrue is such an upgrade over Eric Bledsoe. And crazy enough, they didn't really lose anything defensively here. I mean, Jrue is awesome on defense, of course, and he can fit into what the Bucks want to do in terms of funneling ball handlers into the big guy and drop coverage. And it's the classic Mike Budenholzer defense. We would hope that there will be a little more variety for it in the playoffs. But when we saw Miami beat the Bucks, part of it was because they did a lot of things besides attack and typical pick and rolls, right? Jrue Holiday should be able to definitely help on those things, whether it's just defending a guy like Jimmy one-on-one, defending Tatum or Jalen or Kyle Lowry or Kyrie Irving. Jrue, of course, is very good at defending guys bigger than him, so this really, really helps out the Bucks in that regard. I mean, defensively, you're looking at Lopez, who has progressed a lot as a rim protector, Giannis, who is probably the best help defender in the NBA, Middleton, who is very good in his own right. We'll see what they do with the 2-guard spot. And now you have Jrue, who I think immediately becomes this team's best on-ball defender. Although sometimes I think Giannis could be that, but he's definitely at his best being a help guy around the basket and whatever else. But yeah, Jrue will definitely help here. Now, in terms of the regular season, you could argue defensively the Bucks couldn't get any better, and I would agree. But postseason-wise, again, because of how rough Bledsoe would be in the playoffs, how good he would be on defense for you almost wouldn't even matter so much because he'd be giving it a lot back on offense. Teams are leaving him open. He just gets that kind of deer in headlights look, and suddenly he's not as aggressive going to the rim and all that. And we would hope that that doesn't happen with Jrue. And then as a result, you're still going to get the awesome defense, but then with Jrue, you're talking about a guy who, for one, can maybe run some screens with Giannis. I mean, that's something we've wanted for a while now. I mean, I think Giannis sets like 2 screens a game in the pick and roll or whatever it is. Part of that could have been because Bledsoe wasn't good enough to do it a lot. Jrue is definitely better than Bledsoe. I also don't think Bledsoe was a better passer than Giannis. Jrue is a better passer than Giannis, so now he becomes this team's best playmaker. It'll be interesting to see just how much of the offense is run through Jrue and how much of it is still going to be just the general Mike Budenholzer thing of a lot of passing, a lot of handoff plays, that sort of thing. Although, weirdly enough, it seems in the playoffs, the offense gets a lot more stagnant. I don't know, the Coach Bud playoff thing, it's the weirdest thing in the NBA, but still, we would hope that the personnel and just the added playmaking and everything that Jrue does on offense that Bledsoe doesn't do in the playoffs, between being more of a three-point threat and being aggressive going to the rim and being a better passer, can lead to this team being better in the playoffs, having more variety, having more options, and just having more guys to rely on, basically. Now, to talk about Jrue's three-point shooting a little bit more, it has been wishy-washy throughout his career. Sometimes he looks pretty good, sometimes he's kind of bad from outside. I think that is a bit of a fear. I think offensively he should still be much better than Bledsoe. I don't think it's easy to just pinpoint one specific thing that has gone wrong for the Bucks the last 2 years that have led to their disappointing playoff finishes. But if you wanted to pick one thing, you could pick Eric Bledsoe and just how bad he would end up being after being pretty good for the last 2 regular seasons. So if Jrue just simply doesn't do that and is this nice 16 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, awesome defense, good three-point shooter, good passer, all that stuff guy in the postseason, then this is a massive deal for the Bucks. I guess one thing I'm thinking about is, will Jrue immediately become the second option on this team? I don't know. I feel like Middleton is still probably going to take a few more shots than Jrue, just because that just seems to be how those two players are wired. I think Jrue, in a perfect world, I think Jrue would prefer to be a guy setting teammates up, but at the same time, he has averaged about 16 to 17 shots a game the last 2 years, so maybe him and Middleton's shots per game will be kind of identical. Of course, Giannis will still be the leading shot taker and all that, but it'll be cool. I mean, you think about, you have Jrue who can break down defenders better than Bledsoe could, Middleton who, of course, has improved in that area, Giannis who, of course, is great, even if sometimes I wish they would run more ISOs with him, if even just from the baseline, rather than him just setting 7 screens in one play but never actually getting the ball. I'm mainly talking about the playoffs here. I kind of assumed even if the Bucks did nothing this offseason, they would still win 60 games again, or 50-something if we're going to play 72, whatever. So I'm just really thinking about this for the playoffs, and like I was saying, between Jrue, Giannis, Middleton, 3 guys who can create, Lopez, who's spacing the floor out. His shooting wasn't as good this previous year, but we hope it's good. You imagine we're still going to see some Giannis at center. Potentially we should see more. We would also really like to see Giannis play 47, 48 minutes if he has to in a game. Again, Coach Bud in the playoffs. It's a very weird thing, but it is a reality. But even so, this is the type of move that you got to make, especially with Giannis having 1 year left. You got to go for it. So this is big. To think about the rest of the team with Milwaukee, I mean, we're going to have to see who the starting 2 guard is. I guess as of right now, the best candidate is Dante DiVincenzo. They're at about 130-something million, with the luxury tax being 130-something million. So they might not have too many options in free agency. But from a basketball standpoint, this certainly makes sense. It also is a good time to acquire Jrue Holiday, because if James Harden's going to end up with the Nets, granted, I don't think the Nets have the best offer for the guy, but if that does end up happening, then you're going to need as many good on-ball defenders as you can get.